Hi, and welcome to the Soul and Survival podcast with Grant and Louise Bentley. We have run the Victorian College of Classical Homeopathy since 1995. We are both qualified practicing homeopaths, and Grant is also a naturopath. Together, we discovered a link between energy and facial structure based on traditional ideas from homeopathy that have roots going back 200 years. This project is called Homeopathic Facial Analysis, or HFA for short, and has been the cornerstone of clinical diagnosis and training courses since 1999. Between us, we have written and produced 7 HFA books, including Soul and Survival. Soul and Survival is the philosophy of energy influencing matter and how this energy forms individual facial structure, our unconscious drives and fears, our life patterns, and universal time cycles.
Hi everybody to this Soul and Survival podcast, and hi to Louise. And
Hi Grant.
How are you? You guys can see you've got a piece of paper in front of you.
Yep. We're just having a very brief chat about what we left off with last time, and I think it was kind of interesting because you told me that a patient asked you this question, and it made me think about what anybody's entitled to say when you're not particularly trained in a certain area. And obviously you're a trained naturopath and you're a trained homeopath, but you've got 30 years of experience of talking to people, and that gives you, experience means a lot. And you have a lot of experience in listening to people, listening to their life stories, their stresses, how they handle things. And this patient asked you the question, what do you think patients most commonly do wrong? And you mentioned it to me, and you mentioned the answer that you phrased back to that patient. And we just had a really interesting conversation on the back of that. So I just thought that was worth sharing. So I'll ask the question again as if I was the patient. What do you think patients most commonly do wrong?
Before I even answer that, when you say about training, why are you qualifying the question?
I'm qualifying it because I get the impression, I listen to lots of different people on lots of different topics, and clearly you like to listen to someone who has some level of education in the area. You just, not that doesn't mean anybody else hasn't got a valid point to make. But I'm making that because I think everybody underestimates the value of experience. And I think one of the things that a homeopath who has got many years in the field comes to know in so many areas is they just are so experienced and they hear things, and you're naturally put patterns together. That's who you are. That makes you a very good homeopath. And I just think it's important that, you're not a trained counsellor or a psychologist or whatever, but you are a very experienced homeopath. And as such, you hear these stories and they mean something when you hear things over and over and over. That was the point I was trying to make. This isn't coming from education. This is coming from experience.
Well, actually, I am trained in psychological medicine, and
psychotherapy.
I do have a postgrad in psychotherapy, so I actually am. But I'm pointing. The reason that I'm raising the question is because I sometimes. Look, I rail against this idea that if I didn't have the psychotherapy, then I'm not particularly trained enough to answer a question like this. But if I just had the homeopathy with me, then for some reason I'm not qualified to be able to answer that question. So, like, if there was a third person in this room, I'm allowed to answer it because I've got psychotherapy. You're not allowed to answer it because you don't. I just think, honestly, I don't agree with that kind of stuff. There are butchers and carpenters and plumbers out there that could probably put up a really great answer to that question because they've seen it in their lives too. So I don't think prior qualifications, they shouldn't be discounted. But I think we need to take people's ideas at face value, and whether or not you agree with them shouldn't be based on, that sort of ad hominem argument where you start playing the person rather than what they're saying. And I think that to some degree that's part of an ad hominem argument, like you're not qualified enough to have an opinion in this. Well, I just disagree with that.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was trying to say, because I hear that sort of argument that you should only listen to somebody who's qualified in a specific topic. And because life has become really broken down into small, specific areas, it kind of limits people who want to talk in a broad way. And I know you see patients and homeopathy in a very broad way. And I think that's a real benefit to do that. So I do apologise.
No, it's not an apology.
No, I have to say
it's
this.
Not about that.
I do want to say I apologise for discounting the psychotherapy. I'm very sorry about that. That was well before my time, so I'd sort of forgotten about that. But
Christ, that was nearly 40 years ago.
I know. But I mean, it obviously gave you an entry point into this world, as all education does. It gives you an entry point, but experience is huge too. That was really what I was trying to say. So let's get back to the question.
I think, though, just as a full stop to this, is that I think I'll say ad hominem is where you attack the man rather than the ball if you're playing a sport, But I think that's the only one I don't like. People who put up ad hominem arguments shouldn't be listened to. That's what I think.
Okay, fair enough.
Because some people come out with really great stuff. What are you saying? That you listen to some of the lyrics of some deeper songs. They don't even have to be all that deep. They're not even trying to be deep. But some of these artists can hit on a single line in a song that's almost a university lecture. It just explains, but because they're an artist or a guitarist and they have no right to say it, that's silly to me. And it also doesn't discount the gravity of what they're saying. So your local mailman can come up with because he meets with people and talks with people, he can come up, or she can come up with these great ideas of how life works. But, what do? You just sort of say because they're a guitarist, then suddenly we shouldn't listen to them. I honestly know that's not what you're intended with that, opening. But at the same time, it's a bit of a bugbear of mine, the way everyone stratifies according to prior qualifications, whether or not I should listen to you or not, when the reality is that you should listen to anyone that's got a good idea. And if the idea is not good, then it should be just taken on its merits.
So we're talking about content, and I guess that was my main point. And because, like you, I've observed it, and I feel like it really narrows down our thinking about any topic. So I think it's really important to take on board people's experience. And this patient asked you this question because they obviously respected what you were going to come up with as an answer. And when I heard it from you, just that as a conversation, I thought, that's a really interesting question. It's very broad, but it's interesting. So, do you want to go back to that?
Yeah. So, look, first of all, that was a couple of weeks ago, so I forgot my exact answer. But the answer will be roughly the same. I remember the conversation. And the question was, well, what... This is levelled at adults. This is an adult, whereas often we'll talk about kids because we'll talk about pandas or we'll talk about whatever. But this is mainly to do with what are adults doing. Why does an adult become a patient? Why does an otherwise healthy person, now this is where where the qualification is, right? It's not somebody who's born behind the eight ball a little bit with as far as health goes, but an otherwise healthy person in their 20s and 30s, what makes their body start to collapse? And look, there's a few things, but I think the single biggest mistake that people make is that they start chasing and perfecting what they're not good at rather than what they are good at. And that is a real energy drain. And so what I mean by that is that if somebody is either laughed at or not picked for a certain team or whatever, everyone has some natural skills. Now, the problem when you start going down this avenue of natural skills is that people start immediately going, well, how can I make a business out of it? Or how can I change the world? And it's not meant to be that. It's meant to be for you. And these skills are just things that you like to do and that some other people surrounded right in your orbit benefit from. Now, those skills could be anything from music to just nurturing. So you're just a natural born nurturer. So you're going to make a great mother or father or a great friend in need. And so what? But it could be other things too. You could be a great sports person, or you could be, whatever. You get the impression. The trouble is a little bit, particularly when you go to school and you go into those teen years and your brain starts rewiring itself. So when you listen to who's a modern day person, but like a Bruce Lipton, right? Now, I love Bruce. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to say anything bad about him, but there's a real emphasis on the first 7 years. And that first 7 years is because our brain is taking everything in, but there's no filter, right? Because the conscious mind hasn't really developed itself enough. And once it starts developing itself, it can start acting as almost a sentinel. It's a sieve as to what it's going to believe and what it isn't going to believe. But up until that sieve is put in place, then everything is accepted as a truth. And so as a result of that, we start forming these beliefs of the world and ourselves that we will carry with us all the time. But there is, I'm going to say, not that he's wrong, he's absolutely right, but a little bit of extra emphasis needs to be placed on the teenage mind, because the teenage mind is actually, that's where the brain's going through a second rewiring, so to speak. And this is why, you often see parents will go, well, where did my kid go? They used to have this really happy child and now they're this moody cuss that won't come out of the bedroom, or they used to be, X and now they're Y. And it's not, or every parent wants them to go back to X, wants them to go back into that pre-teen state. This is not my child. This is not who they are. It is actually who they are. But their brain is rewiring itself for a second time. Now, in just the same way as everything kind of goes in, particularly from parents in that first 7 years, we are making ourselves a lot more socially we're trying to become socially important. We're trying to become socially accepted. And so the problem with that, and I will get to it, this is all part of it, is that our skills happen to be, whether or not they're a personality or an actual skill, they're our sort of sharper edges. They're the things that make us stand out from the group. They're the things that we can offer. We're just like everybody else, and then some. And the then some is what we're good at. But often what can happen is that through other people's jealousy or other people's demands on us or expectations, we file those sharp edges off. And so what happens is that life can become a little bland, because where we get our happiness from, or where we get our skill from, or where we get our energy from is kind of dampened down. Because you've got to remember, when you're talking about what ill health is in your 40s to a previously healthy person, you're talking about a misappropriation of energy. So energy is going into the wrong spots, right? So you're putting it into, I guess, either work or worry or, and that worry can be about self, whether or not you're going to be accepted into the community that you belong to, or it could be worry about somebody else. But, there's all these areas of our life that are really energy expensive. And that's just, that's that whole Buddhist part of life, right? Chop wood, carry water, I mean, it's going to happen, and that's the way it is. But if you don't feel that energy loss, then you're going to end up with a progressive energy loss. And when you end up with a progressive energy loss for a long period of time, whatever are your weak spots in the body, which need more energy to be nurtured, suddenly don't have that extra energy. And so now what happens is that functional pathology starts to begin. That is soreness, bit of pain, bit of whatever. And if that's not heeded, then structural pathology begins. Now we've got serious problems. And now you've got to have energy in abundance, because to heal an area takes more energy than to maintain an area. And this is why we need medicines. It's not about that whole sort of, look, I'm not a big fan of this natural part of just leave everything alone and nature will take care of it. Any interference is wrong interference. I disagree with that. We've needed medicine in some form in our lives for as long as history goes back. And that's not just for wound healing or anything. We just need it because life's challenging and you need to replenish what you put out. And there's actually only a very few ways in which energy can be replenished on a daily basis. I mean, as you know, we have food, and so food's got to be really good quality food. And even that question of what's good quality food, even that question can cause really savage debate among people of what the only thing that we share in common, whether or not you're vegan, vegetarian, carnivore, omnivore, it doesn't really matter what vor you are. The only thing that people should have in common is that your food should be from as natural a source as possible. Right? So, not fake meat and, real meat, real vegetables, real whatever. And even grain, grain used to be okay. But that's because we were pulling rickshaws or ploughing, 20 acres of field with a horse in front of us. But now most of us don't need that kind of energy input. So it just turns to fat. Now we've got problems. But, all right, going back. So the misappropriation of energy by not being yourself, essentially. Find out what you're good at, what you like. And usually the two go hand in hand. You like it because you're good at it, and you're good at it because you like it. But that can be anything, right? It doesn't have to be, but there are rules to the game. There are rules to this energy game, and every homeopath should understand those rules. And those rules are that energy isn't stored for a long period of time. It's exhaustible. You need to replenish energy every single day. That's why we eat. That's why we sleep. So you really only get it from three sources. You get it from happiness, you get it from food, and you get it from sleep. If you take away those three things in your life, you're not going to last very long at all. Right? And it's going to be, and what length of time you do last is going to be miserable. because you just don't have the energy. We are a battery, and it goes in and it goes out. And there are rules to how energy fuels and animates the physical body. You know, last week, I think it was last week or a couple of weeks ago, when we were talking about, you know how I was talking about how there was a homeopath there that said, I never have to repeat, for example. Now, you can take that as a thing of arrogance on my part, sort of saying, oh, well, I'm just obviously being jealous because this person doesn't have to repeat and I do. That's because I can't get it right. There's a difference in ideologies, some people might. No, it's not. I can say that with certainty because it's not how energy works. You don't have one meal at the beginning of the month and go, well, that should do me until, July. Energy just doesn't work like that. If you have 2 hours extra sleep, or, I sleep 12 hours one day, so that means I don't have to sleep for the rest of the week. Does it really? I mean, who's ever done that? So when we talk about I never have to repeat or one dose and wait, this is how I started understanding that I was doing the wrong thing. It's because it's not how energy works. It's not an arrogance or an ideological issue. It's just understanding how things work. And when you understand that if you're putting most of your energy into areas that are trying to make you blend in with and not stand out from the crowd, or you're trying to push all your energy into what were your weak areas so you won't be laughed at, rather than perfecting all the areas that you're naturally good at, or even that one area that you're naturally good at. That's my answer to why healthy people in their 20s and 30s become patients in their 40s and 50s.
So basically just find what your energetic thrill is, your positive zone.
Just what you like. It's what makes you feel content.
And it could be anything. It doesn't have to have a judgment to it. For some people, it might be reading a book. For some people, it might be writing a book. Yeah. For some people, it's looking at art. For some people, it's creating art.
It might be for some people just holding a baby in their arms and caring for it.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be world changing. It doesn't have to be anything like that. I in my mind, and I've said this in some classes, I call it the Rolling Stones effect. And what I mean by this is that if you're a bank clerk that hates their job and you live the Rolling Stones lifestyle, that Keith Richards lifestyle, you would join the 27 Club. Right? But they can do it, and they're hitting nearly their 80s. So why can they go through a life of chemical abuse, this chemical love affair that they've had going for so long, although I think they're all sort of slowly giving it up as they're...
I think some of them gave it up a while ago.
A while ago, yeah. But if you hated what you were doing, but you tried to live that lifestyle, you'd be lucky to make 40.
Yeah, of course.
But they double that, and the reason that they double that age is because of all of the energetic input from doing constantly what they love.
Yeah,
it's when you just stop to think about what that means, it's a really important life lesson for people.
And so how much in a clinical setting do you get into this topic?
Oh, rarely.
And yet it's really important.
Well, it is really important, but two things. Probably 80% of my clinics are kids.
Children, yeah.
Right, so I'm talking to parents about their kids, and their kids are in an inflammatory condition, and homeopathy gets them out of that quicker than anything, really. But that even saying that, I mean, that can still take a while to do it. It's just that I think we're the best ones to do it. Not me and you, I mean homeopathy generally.
Yeah, because you've seen people come to the clinic with this inflammation, and so many of them have tried so many different ways to deal with it. And although, they'll get some forward motion, it doesn't seem to hold, or it doesn't seem to go as deep as what good homeopathy will do. So, that's just an observation. Maybe there's something out there we don't know about.
But when I'm dealing with adults, though, I do often say to them, well, what do you really like to do? And if their answer is, I'm not really sure, there's problem number one. But I might have people that just sort of say fishing, for example. I just like going out in nature, and I just, fishing gives me a reason to be really quiet and just sit. Well, when did you last do it? And, I haven't done it for years, is usually your response. Well, you can see the problem, right? We're not living the lifestyle we want to live. We're living the lifestyle that was forced upon us, or the lifestyle that we, out of fear, withdrew from. All right? And so because we didn't want to be ridiculed, because we didn't want to be ridiculed, we suppress these things. I think J.R.R. Tolkien's a great example of that, right? Lord of the Rings. Every parent would love to have a son or daughter as successful and as creative as J.R.R. Tolkien, but no one wants their kid to go to university to study Norse mythology.
Yeah.
Right? But if you let them go...
Yeah.
Anyway.
So what you're saying is, try to find your passion as early as you can and invest at least part of your life. It's not going to be all, because there are basic things we have to achieve and do to survive, and they're not always, the most interesting ones to get up for. But as long as part of your life involves the passion, energetically you'll fare a lot better.
Very important for you and your family, because your family is only as happy as you are, so you can't be the only... When you're in a family, if there's one person that's either sick, suffering or miserable, they bring the whole house down. We're a unit. So it's really important, a little bit like when you're in the aircraft, to put your own... the own mask on first, and then that will calm you down to be able to put the mask on everybody else that you care about. So you really do owe it to everyone that you care about to make the best of who you are. And sometimes that's just not serving or providing or what. Sometimes that's just a little bit of your own time, and just sort of saying today or this afternoon I'm going to do X. This is on your own free time. No one's suggesting that you give up your job or you want to live in a teepee when you've got 4 kids at home. That's just ridiculous. You can't do stuff like that. But we've got a brain, so we can work out how do we balance what we have to do with what we want to do. That's simple.
And when you talk to, the adults about this, and they do take this on, how does the remedy integrate with this other component?
Well, the remedy works better when you're integrating self.
Yeah, because that's what essentially a remedy's doing, right? It's somehow integrating your vital force with your brain, with your emotions, with your body.
Well, I said that there were 3 ways of getting energy. One is good quality food, and then the other, maybe we can even talk about that at some other stage, of what we consider to be good, which will be different from others, but as long as everyone sort of understands this is our take on it rather than the full stop. But sleep, that is absolutely undeniable. Everyone needs good quality sleep. Everyone needs happiness in their life. And the last one, but it is temporary, is a good constitutional remedy, because that's all it's doing. Understand that a remedy is a no thing. Right? So all it is energy. The trick to the game is to find the energy that is going to be self-energy for that person who's sitting in front of you. Otherwise, they are not going to accept it. Their body will just reject it. Rejects anything that's foreign. So what we're doing is that we use the signs and symptoms as a guide to recognize self, the healing mechanism, the part of the vital force or the survival instinct, which is trying its best to rebalance itself. And then if we give an energy that is similar to that, it will take it on as self-energy and be able to do the job quicker. But essentially, it's just, it's you got to, by the time someone's coming to see me, problems have already started. So they need more energy than just a lifestyle adjustment can do.
Yeah, and so that energy, that remedy, which is, as you say, energetic self, it starts by pulling you out of the hole, gradually pulling you up, back to a point of surface. But then, as you said, we're all born with weak areas, which you can usually identify 1, 2, 3, maybe 4. Everyone's a bit different in that area as to which area might be weak and how weak it is and in what way it's weak. So after you pull them out of the hole, next thing you've got to do is build them back up again. So it does take time and it does take patience, and you might need to change remedies at certain points when the symptoms display that change is required. So that's the case management. As you say, that's the art.
Well, that's the art. That's the true art. The true art is not finding the remedy, not really, because the patient's telling you that, right? Mm-hmm. There's signs, and that's why it's really important to follow signs and symptoms. This is why I'm not a rap for homeopathic methods that use protocols. Because the protocols are showing you now, protocols are an intellectual exercise, but they're not homeopathy. They might be using homeopathically prepared remedies, but they're not homeopathy. Everything with homeopathy is about the simillimum. They must match the presenting signs and symptoms. Otherwise, it is not homeopathic. It's not homeopathy. And to me, homeopathy is pretty much as good as what it gets. The only reason that it's still on the outer is because it's just, I think in some ways, just too sophisticated. We just don't get the hang of how sophisticated this system is.
It's not material. I mean, when you're talking about even protocols, and for those that are listening that don't know what that is, that's a sort of a set routine of you give this remedy at this stage and then you expect a change and then you give another one. And there's this sort of preemptive way of looking at it. When we teach in our online course, and I will plug this because we put a lot of effort into writing homeopathy into the most simplified, straightforward, pragmatic way you can use it. And if you follow that training, one of the things we say over and over is homeopathy is reactive. It's not preemptive. It's not clairvoyant. You don't know what's going to happen next. You follow the body's lead. And then the body is always trying to get better. Even if it's failing, it's doing its best. It's still trying. And if you follow the way it's trying, you can choose remedies to support it energetically to get there faster and quicker and better. And that's what it's all about. So,
well, if you think about it too, I mean, if you're eating out a lot where they use more sugar than you would at home, they use cheaper, crappier, those sort of seed oils that should be powering tractors. They shouldn't be powering human beings. And then, later on you're sort of saying, okay, well, instead of going to sleep, I've got a little bit of alone time, so I'll watch TV or I'll jump on my iPad or I'll do whatever. So you eat into your sleep time as well, and then it's just all work, or it's just, you're not doing anything on your weekends, you're not sort of supplementing yourself. All three of the primary areas that we were just talking about are being diminished on a daily basis. So when you say how much can how much should you incorporate this knowledge into your life? Well, it's a fair bit, because otherwise what's going to happen is that the constitutional remedy has to carry the shortfall. Now, if that shortfall is fairly consistent, then the remedy that we're giving is really only topping up to what you should do and not making inroads into the healing at all.
Yeah.
So you've got to be doing, and this is what Hahnemann used to talk about when he was talking about obstacles to cure. Right? You've got to remove these things first. So you've got to be on a reasonably good diet. And the easiest way of doing a reasonably good diet is just avoid, that old sort of cliche of just do the circumference of the supermarket. Don't go down the middle aisles where all the junk is. Anything in a packet, you've already made a mistake. And so if you can just do that and get some good quality sleep, and then go fishing if that's your thing, or hold a baby if that's your thing, you're already starting to be on the mend. And well, what the homeopathic does is that it can do it far more rapidly now, because you put a plug in the hole that's draining the energy.
Yeah. And you did just allude before, a few minutes back, to, I don't know why, homeopathy or this idea of using energy for healing is disregarded, but I think we've still got to remember that we live in a material world and we seek material answers first, because they're measurable, they're hard form, you can touch them, smell them, look at them, hear them, etc. And importantly, in an economic world, you can patent them. And so everything about medicine's become about money, not only about money. Obviously, there's some really good people that want to do really good things with that material system.
Well, they're the individuals, but the system itself, money.
It's lost its way.
Particularly pharmacy.
Yeah, it's really lost its way. And it won't look at energy because, well, let's face it, one, it's more difficult. You have to treat everybody as an individual, not as a factory line where, we all take the same thing within certain variations. And there's a real genuineness to homeopathy, and you can't patent a remedy. It's something found in nature, and energy is very sort of ethereal. It's really hard to pin down. I still think it's amazing that it can hold in a bottle. The fact that it can hold in a bottle in liquid or on, grains of sugar, of milk, is extraordinary. And yet clearly it does, because it's been doing it observably for 200 years.
Wait, but it's designed to. There's a certain quality of energy that is designed for that, right? And we know that because it animates us.
And we're a container.
It's
we have
like
a border.
A seed that grows into a tree. All of that life force is packed into that, and there is an aspect of a certain quality. We're getting pretty mystical now, but it's still right. The reality is that there are varying qualities of energies that float down and condense into the material. And so when you're talking about that highly etheric, almost things where we put words like angels and God and spirit, and that's a different quality to what we're talking about here. A vital force or a survival instinct is maybe a flow down a funnel, but by the time it's getting to that really small end of the funnel, that's just before it becomes material. Because that's, you only have to look at uranium becoming lead. Uranium becomes lead just simply by losing energy. Okay, it's over a long period of time, but nothing actually changes. The physical changes in response to the energy changes. You only add one proton to a nucleus and you've got a completely different element. And a proton is just an energy. So energy molds the physical, but there is almost a pre-physical energy.
So there's this link between this huge energetic wash like the universe down to a bottle or a person where it holds with a defining edge. There's a boundary there.
When energy reaches point X in its character, it has to, that point X is like what we would call a survival instinct or a vital force or a life force or whatever it might be. When it reaches that point X in its when it condenses to that point, its purpose is to animate. Its purpose is to be physical. It's that one step before physical, but it must attach to physical. And so what homeopathy has done is that it's reverse engineered the physical into the pre-physical. But that's nature, is that it must bond with something physical. I mean, that's what ghosts are to some degree, right? And I know everyone goes, ugh, but let's just take, for example, that 50 million people that have seen something like that, aren't all lying for personal profit. Let's just say that they're true. Maybe not every single one is true, but a lot of them are true. Well, the question becomes, well, what's going on? Not just throw it in the bin and ridicule that person. That's just an extension of what we were talking about before. I've got a really good quality. I'm really good at this. Other teenagers come along, ridicule me, back in my box I go for the next 20 or 30 years. Doesn't mean you can't have a good life, but some spark's missing. That's what I mean. And without that spark, your energy supply is not quite as good as what it should be. That's what I mean by it leads. That's a misappropriation or a suppression of energy that then can become a pathology. I just lost it then. Now,
well, you're talking about this idea of homeopathy is almost reverse engineering from material back to pre-energy, and that there seems to be some defined quality to pre-energy that's more specific than just floating universal energy. Like it seems to come into a zone.
It attaches, right? I mean, you don't walk around seeing hauntings everywhere, right? They're usually in certain places, even in certain parts of a house, right?
And you have to be in a certain state to recognise it.
Well, quite possibly. But what we're seeing there is that they're attaching to anything physical, even if it's bluestone.
Yeah.
They're because it's the nature of that. Well, I'm almost saying physical energy, which sounds silly because it sounds a contradiction, but it's like that. It's an energetic form, but its purpose is to bond with physical body to animate it, right? And we know that it's inside everything because we know it's inside plutonium and uranium because the bomb went bang, and you can turn the lights on in certain places around the world because it's powered by nuclear energy. So we know it's inside everything. It's not just about human life or plant life, and we know it's there because we can see it grow. We can interact with it. I can throw a ball to a dog and it comes running around, running and picking up the ball and comes running back. That energy exists. It animates, and in us as well. But it also is in non-organic life. And so really, I don't think it's a big stretch to sort of, well, what are hauntings? They're highly charged emotion or thought patterns that when the physical body breaks down, leap into anything because that's its design of some sort of physical quality. And it just, reproduces itself over and over again. Doesn't necessarily mean it's conscious, by the way.
And that relates very much to your idea that you've written about in Soul and Survival, that these intense moments have occurred in these historical time frames, and they seem to have a border of 150 years, even though the borderline's a little murky, can sort of seem to go across 5, 10, even 25 years, but you can see a shift occur but that those intense emotional moments, often to do with tragedy and difficulty and stress, have been sort of collectively pushed into the ether and then come back via us, our miasm, which we can read from facial structure, and they come back into our remedies. And our remedies also belong to one of the miasms. And so it all kind of locks and keys from a very big idea into something as specific as, helping your headaches. It's extraordinary.
Yeah,
really.
and this is the thing. I think we don't, and that's what I meant about the sophistication. I think homeopathy is ridiculed only because we don't understand the sophistication of what it is and how it fits into the bigger picture. I mean, even when you take signs and symptoms, what you're doing there is the brain is taking in everything, and hypnosis shows you that, where somebody who doesn't consciously remember anything under hypnosis can tell you the temperature of that day 3 years ago, and then what the number plate of the car was of the bank robber that they saw that they had consciously forgotten, and now you've got a lead. You know what I mean? You are taking in vast amounts of information. But then what your brain does is that it sorts that out, particularly for memory. It sorts it out from most important to least important. And so now the question becomes, well, what is the deciding factor of most to least? And it depends on the amount of the charge of the emotion
intensity
that's attached to it. The more emotion is attached to it, the more that emotion is there to tell your brain this is really important. If I said to you what happened in January 16, 2017, if nothing much happened in your life, you will have absolutely no idea. You'll have to refer to your calendar, and even then you're reading it and you still can't remember. And that's because it was probably just an average day. So there's no reason to commit that to memory. But if you were in a house fire, or your partner died, or whatever, it's something where there's high emotion, then you are definitely, that day is burned into your brain. And it's what emotion is there to do. It's to burn things in their intensity. But when you have a collection of misery, so like when we were talking about the ghosts before, right? When you go to these haunted houses, how many times does the story go, well, this was a family home where everyone lived fairly happily, there was, most people got along, and the place is haunted? No, that's not what you hear. There's always some tragedy there, right? There's something where someone was murdered, or somebody was, mentally deranged and banging their head and eventually fell down the stairs and died that way. There's tragedy there. And the reason for that is because the survival instinct is primarily designed to keep you alive. And unfortunately, we're more designed for danger than we are for happiness, because happiness won't kill us, whereas danger will. So when there's a stick on the ground, you jump back, because particularly if you live in the Australian bush like what we do, it could be a snake rather than it could be a stick. And then you just laugh and you say, silly me. But the reason that you'll just still jump the next time is because your vital force is designed, because the consequences of you being wrong, that it's just a stick when it actually is a snake, is far more dangerous than being right. And that it is a stick, no harm done. But if you're wrong, there's a lot of harm done. And so we're designed for that. We're designed for that. In order to keep you alive and to keep you animated, we're designed that the more negative emotions are the ones that we need to focus on rather than the positive. And when that happens in a collective form, like World War II, when you had how many millions of crying mothers, and how then you had the Holocaust. This is all part of the package of a 6-year period, and that's just condensed into the ether, and that goes into the survival instinct of everyone who was, who is now going to be green because it was living in a green time. And it's I guess in some ways the survival instinct, when we talk about life themes and survival instincts, it's like our own personal haunting that's going on in our DNA.
It's interesting too, or just thinking about what you were saying about ghost sightings and so forth, and how, you mentioned 50 million, and that's only a small, I know that's not a literal number, but just let's say that it's still a small percentage of total population. So it's really easy for those who have never seen something to just scoff or whatever. I find it interesting, and I know you research everything energetics, so we've looked at lots of these sorts of things, but I find it interesting with all the shows and so forth and all the people that claim to have seen something. They're often people who themselves have had a harsh life, often poor. They may have had something. They seem to have had more grief, more tragedy, more difficulty, more stress than perhaps, someone who's fortunate enough to have been born into a more kind of middle class zone where life ticks along, and as long as they follow certain rules, things go reasonably well for them. No one escapes with everything being perfect, of course, but there is a group of people, and I remember we worked in a clinic many years ago now, but it was a very poor area, and we heard some really individual and very tragic stories from many of these people, and they seem to see things and feel things more, and I think that's because their energy is in a different place.
Okay, that's an interesting place. So you're saying that almost like a similia similibus, that they are in a different state because of that background, because of that emotion, and then they're more likely to. Then they got
so if there's a ghost trotting around who's tragically, not being able to leave the place where something really awful happened, because their lives been intense and awful at some level, not all the time, obviously, but you do. If you want to examine the life stories of people who are in more well-to-do circumstances than people who aren't, you definitely hear worse stories from the people who aren't. There's across the board, it's not 100%, but it's definitely more dominant. And I just wonder if they're more emotionally or energetically, let's use the word energetically, open to that sort of the energy of a ghost. I just think it could be the case.
I don't know. It might be. It's certainly an interesting thought, rather than just trying to prove. And look, people that are already open say, no, I think that there's a likelihood there. The ones that are closed and just go, oh, rubbish straight away before you've even finished your sentence. They're never going to, it's a bit like homeopathy, isn't it? They're never going to be open to hearing it anyway. They call themselves skeptic, but they're a million miles from
a true skeptic does their research. A true skeptic looks at both sides.
Well, you don't draw a conclusion beforehand.
No.
That's all that you're doing now is you're just creating the circular argument on what you already believe.
Yeah, you're just a cynic. There's a difference between being a cynic and being a skeptic. A true skeptic, and it's a really good thing to be skeptical of a piece of information and then be open to it could be true, it may not be, it may be partially true. What does the opposite team say? Where's the evidence on both sides? Bring it all together, and now you're a true skeptic.
I'm not sure this is his name. I like the guy. I really like the guy. I saw him once on YouTube, and he's written a book called Ghost Stories. A Scottish guy called Neil Oliver. Now, I might have the surname wrong, but I first got into him because he had some shows on TV out here about history, and I think that's his. I'll have to look it up.
I reckon you might be right.
I think his name's Neil Oliver. But anyway, he wrote a book called Ghost Stories. It's fairly recent, apparently. But one of the really interesting stories that he spoke about on this podcast was that it was a story of a person who bought a house. Oh, I might, because I'm unprepared, the details might not be right. So it's a paraphrase, right? But a person bought a house, but they then started seeing this apparition of a woman banging her head against the wall of the house and crying. And in the end, for some unbeknown reason, I think it was Neil was telling this story, but he actually met, I'm making a bodge of this, but he ends up meeting the woman who used to own the house, and the apparition was her. And she wasn't dead, so it wasn't a ghost. But what had happened is that during the war, this woman's husband wrote to her. She found out he was having an affair. And she was so devastated. She remembered the moment of crying in the house and banging her head against the wall for relief at exactly that spot that these people are seeing the apparition. But she's still alive. So it's not a ghost as such.
But it's a memory.
It is a memory that has been, it's been so intense that it's almost been an out-of-body experience. And because the energetic rules of pre-material energy are, the rules are that you must be in some form of matter, it's gone straight into the walls, and these people have seen it. And so when you say, how can it go on to a pill? That's how. That's how. Hahnemann worked out a way of deconstructing the matter, so the pre-matter energy that contains all of the information that was going to go into animating that matter still exists, but not in its physical form, and then chucking it quickly into a material substance like a drop of ethanol or a drop of, or a milk sugar or pill or something like that. And it doesn't matter. Remember, it's not a conscious mind. It's not sort of, I don't want to go there. I want to go into that person. It's not like that. The rules are that it has to go into something physical. The nearest physical thing that's there, pretty much.
Oh, it's such a fascinating topic. I reckon you've done a really nice job of going from what do you think patients most commonly do wrong, which is essentially
to telling ghost stories.
And that's very like you, because you love a good ghost story.
I do love a good ghost story.
You've always loved a good ghost story.
If anyone has any good ghost stories, they should send them in.
And you may not have even become a homeopath if you didn't love ghost stories. So there you go. It's pretty interesting, but I really enjoyed that talk. So, if you're happy, I think that's a really nice place to end it.
Yep, let's finish it there.
So I just want to mention again that we've got to say thank you too. We've released our podcast. We're running a little ahead in episodes, which is good because we're pretty busy, but we've had some really nice feedback, and the numbers are going really well. We're told by people who know about such things that we're doing extremely well, so we're quite happy about that, and we're glad you're listening, and we hope that you're enjoying it, and we hope you become really interested in what HFA, homeopathy, is, and grab a book, get onto a course, and become a really competent, confident homeopath using these principles.
You know what I'd like to do too? I'd like to talk to somebody at some stage who's a bit of an expert in Indian philosophy, like Samskara. Because I reckon there's a lot of homeopathy in there. And I'd like to get, even if they don't know the first thing about homeopathy, that's not what I don't need that from them. I can do that part. But I would like to know. So if anyone does know that, then contact us, because I'd like to have you on.
So how to contact us? Go to our website, which is Victorian College of Classical Homeopathy, vcch.org, and there's a contact us button. So yeah, wouldn't it be great if after this episode airs, we get a contact email saying, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you about samskara." That'd be great.
Or a ghost hunter. I wouldn't mind talking
Okay,
to
definitely.
a ghost hunter.
If you're a
too.
ghost hunter, get in touch straight away. A ghost hunter, definitely. Please do. Grant will be very happy.
I will. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Thanks
Okay.
a lot, Grant. It was
Bye-bye.
great. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to Soul and Survival. If you are interested in more information, books, courses, consultations, learning more about facial analysis or life themes, please visit our college site, Victorian College of Classical Homeopathy, vcch.org.